All right, here we are on a very cold, cloudy fall day in Detroit, Michigan at the M1 Concourse racetrack. And behind me is the 2024 Alfa Romeo Tonale. It's a brand new vehicle to the United States. It comes with one powertrain as a plug-in hybrid. The brand is going fully electric by 2027, so this plug-in hybrid's a bit of an interim vehicle for them. And it uses a 1.3-liter internal combustion engine in the front and fully electric drive in the back. So under the hood, it looks pretty conventional. The Tonale has a transverse inline four-cylinder turbocharged engine, which is pretty universal through a lot of brands and any of their compact vehicles these days. This engine is merely, though, 1.3 liters and makes 180 horsepower and 199 pound-feet of torque. But that's not the end of the powertrain story on this car, as these bright orange cables kind of hint at. Usually whenever you see big, thick orange cables, there's some sort of electrical component. And indeed, this is a all-wheel drive vehicle with the rear drive on the Tonale being 100% electric. And in the back, there's a 121 horsepower electric motor that's driving the rear wheels that has another 184 pound-feet of torque. So combined, you've got a pretty good level of horsepower and torque out of this vehicle that make it quite quick. And you can drive it as an EV, which means it's only rear-wheel drive at that point, and you can go up to 84 miles an hour actually doing that. It has 33 miles of range, so you can get around town, do all those things if you find you're using that range up, and you know, there's no worries about getting home because you're just going to fire up the internal combustion engine on the vehicle, which will fire up automatically, and away you go. Right now we're rolling along in pure EV mode. It says we have 22 miles of range, and they say this is the future of Alfa. 2027, they're going to stop producing internal combustion engines entirely and go full battery electric on all their vehicles, including the Giulia and the Stelvio. Bittersweet for car guys like me, but you know, that's kind of the direction obviously the industry's heading, and we're trying to keep the idea, of course, is they're trying to keep Alfa Romeo's sporting, motorsports, Italian pedigree all in place while this transition takes place. It's going to be interesting for all the auto manufacturers, I think, to figure out if they get to keep their DNA when they drastically change their vehicles so much as a lot of the emission standards are demanding that they do. But for now, the car is really nice. I mean, it drives well, it's very smooth. Really nice visibility. So when you look at the instrument clusters, these are new, and they will go in the new versions of the Stelvio and the Giulia as well, but the Tonale is the first to get them. We've got a 12.3-inch instrument cluster there that's fully electronic and configurable. You go through all the different drive modes, and you get all the different configurations going all the way to the tachometer when we get in dynamic, and it fires up the internal combustion engine. And then for the center display, it's 10.25 inches, very much landscape, very wide and short, which is kind of good for visibility. Still gives you enough real estate here to be able to see the map and have a couple things running at once if you want to. So that's 10.25 inches. And that's kind of the new upgraded screens that now Alfa is offering on the Tonale, and again will be offering on the redesigns of the new vehicles that are coming in a couple of years. Well, let's take a look in the back of this compact SUV. So we've got a motorized door there. We've got an integrated tonneau cover, which is kind of cool. It has a ski pass-through, which is neat. You don't see that on a lot of vehicles these days. It does have a 60-40 split, and then a fairly high floor, and that you'd expect, of course, because remember, this thing's a plug-in hybrid, so not a ton of storage under here. This is a nice little detail, though. Usually these floors you just have to hold them up, but there's a nice little push button on either side, so it holds it up there. But you can see underneath this styrofoam here, this is all going to be battery and motor stuff and electronics for the hybrid system. Because remember, the actual all-wheel drive in this car, the rear drive in the vehicle doesn't have a drive shaft. It's 100% electric. And the engine, the internal combustion engine, drives only the front wheels. One thing noticing in the Tonale, you're definitely sitting up on this car. It has fairly flat seats. And so, kind of going through these corners here, I'm moving around a lot. So I'm feeling a lot of the industry term is head toss, where you're kind of getting thrown side to side as the vehicle hits things. So it's something that you feel in SUVs and crossovers, but in varying degrees. And certainly I feel a lot in this vehicle where there's a lot of jiggling going on, and kind of wishing it had a more bolstered, more supportive seat that's maybe more scooped out even in the seat bottom. And that would hold me a little bit better in place. But an enjoyable place to be, a nice car to drive, but I can see in the twisty stuff, it starts to be a little bit less comfortable. Did you hear that turn signal? I appreciate a good quality turn signal sound. So many cars just have an artificial clicky sound. This one actually sounds like a bamboo chime you're hitting with a spoon or something. And so I give him extra credit for some guy, some engineer going, you know what? We're not going to have the normal turn signal sound. This is an Alfa Romeo. It needs to be a little bit special. I just use it for no reason. Now, even though this is a plug-in hybrid, it does have an internal combustion engine, and that means it has a transmission, and that means it's got paddle shifters. And Alfa Romeo did these big aluminum column mounted, so you kind of pick your poison there. I'm more of a fan of steering wheel mounted paddles because I'm not a shuffle steer guy. I keep my hands at 9 and 3 all the time, and so having the paddles right behind is really nice for when you're trying to upshift or downshift in a corner, which you shouldn't technically be doing, but sometimes you need to do, especially on the road. You might be doing it when you're not driving really fast. But yeah, so nice aluminum paddles instead of plastic, so that's kind of cool. Of course, downshift on the left, upshift on the right, and you can also shift sequentially with the shifter as well, moving that up and down, and then you just kind of go back and forth between regular drive. So this is nice. At least it has a normal shifter rather than a rotary dial or any of those weird shift configurations where they've got park buttons now. Everyone's sort of deciding to be super stylistic with their shifters, so every car you get in has a 10-minute learning curve and how to take the thing out of park and get it rolling. So at least this is pretty normal, and adding the paddles on top of it. So even though it is a plug-in hybrid, it still has all that normal Alfa DNA of it being a performance vehicle. A couple other little things just noticing driving it. First of all, steering is quite light and fairly quick. And I noticed that kind of through the Alfa range where they're pretty over boosted steering systems. So it's very easy to turn a little more than you expect to because it's so light. Not a ton of feel either, but it's a nice wheel and it's fairly small, has nice little cutouts at 9 and 3. So all of that's where it should be. The start-stop for the engine's actually on the steering wheel here. And a few other little things that just jumped out at me driving it. Again, it's fairly soft, so this thing isn't like really sporty. Maybe that's part of the weight of the hybrid system, but it feels like it doesn't have a lot of roll control. So it's well damped. The suspension's doing a good job absorbing bumps and things. There's not a lot of stiffness when it comes to actual roll control. So you do feel quite a bit of body roll in this, which to me maybe is not super Alfa, but maybe there's a higher performance variant of this coming down the road that will solve that. Maybe there'll be a quadrifoglio version of the Tonale. Now, taking a look at some of the details on the Tonale, this one has the optional wheels on it. These 19-inch wheels are $1,500. You can also see these beautiful red calipers, 4-piston calipers with the Alfa Romeo script on them. That's part of the performance package that includes some drilled-out pedals and the paddle-mounted aluminum shifters. So all of that is part of another package that's a performance package on the car. So there's quite a few options you can add to the vehicle that make it look a little bit sportier and probably give it a bit more performance as well. If I were to look at it and sort of summarize it overall, the thing that jumps out at me, while it is an Alfa Romeo, it isn't super sporty, especially from the feel. While it does have kind of quick steering, which is nice, and a nice steering wheel and those nice aluminum paddles if you get the option paddles on there, but it doesn't feel very sporty to drive as far as the handling is concerned. It has a fairly flat seat that doesn't have a lot of support to it, and a good amount of roll. So while the ride is quite nice, it isn't really flat through the corners, so you feel a lot of body roll as you're driving it. Starts at about $45,000. This one with the options that are on it ends up at about $56,000. So if your driving kind of involves just commuting or highway trips, but not canyon carving, you're thinking an Alfa Romeo, like I want this to be a performance vehicle, I think you might find this a little disappointing. But if you're using it as a normal car, it's pretty stylish. It's very, very easy to use. Good stereo system, enough room in the back, all of that stuff that make it a very practical vehicle with a little bit of Italian flair, and there's nothing wrong with that. So in conclusion, is the Tonale worth the time, the money, and the effort? I think it's a cool little compact SUV. Look at the XC40, for example, from Volvo, or the X1, X2 from BMW. It's kind of right in there. It's got that nice bit of Italian flair to it, so in its styling and the way it drives and looks, the interior, all of that's got, a little bit more than sort of your cookie cutter vehicles that tend to be all over the place. And the one other vehicle we've got to maybe ponder in this equation is the Dodge Hornet, because it is the same platform and you can get a lot of the same features on it. But of course, the Dodge Hornet, being a Dodge, it's a little bit more austere inside and not quite as fancy. So really kind of when you're weighing the pluses and minuses of whether the Tonale is something you should really be considering, again, you're going for something that's a little bit more Italian, a little bit more stylish, and everyone appreciates that. It's going to cost you a little bit more, but I think in this case, it's probably worth it.